Okay, so update here on the Tamiya Madcap. As you can see, it's all fully built. I have all the electronics installed. I've actually run this around in the basement a little bit just to make sure I can get the trim sorted out and, to see how punchy it drives. So it does run. And also the way the electronics are mounted is also a bit different than what you might expect, so I'm going to go over that a little bit. But basically, if you put enough work in, you can actually take a Madcap and modify it to have a Astute-like front bulkhead, front steering rack, rear towers, and so forth, and it can work. So as far as the electronics, I wanted to keep this as light as possible, because normally you would mount a stick pack here, and stick packs are large and they're heavy, and this is towards the rear of the car. The center line of the car is about here. So I want to minimize how much weight is in this direction, because the motor and the gearbox are heavy enough as they are. This is not really a lightweight gearbox, and that's all behind the rear axle. So chances are when this thing jumps, it's going to jump nose up. And I want to try to make it jump as level as possible, while also making everything fit inside the body. So speed control and receiver are up here, batteries here. The only way to make a battery fit here is if you use an ultra shorty and mount it this way. It does just kind of squeeze in there, and this little plastic part here is actually Tamiya Manta Ray camber link. It's just a fixed length camber link, and I just threaded a screw through that into this top plate here, because there's a bunch of screw holes here, and you can just rotate it to cover the battery. This foam here is just to pick up any slack between this guy and the battery, because it's not perfectly spaced. You see there's a gap there, so I use the foam here to take up that gap spacing, and that seems to do well. It at least tries to even out the weight distribution a little bit. So if I drop this down, oops, I'm hitting everything here, it doesn't really slap on the rear, right? If I have a lot of weight in the back, if I drop this down, the rear is going to smack the ground. So this doesn't seem to have that problem, which is good. Now I may have to adjust the preload in the rear, or maybe the springs or something to stiffen it up a little bit, but overall it's not horrible. One problem I did run into, though, sorry, I'm getting my hands in the way here, is I did try to do some indoor jump testing with the jump setup I described a couple of years back, just to make sure that it can jump. Hold on. Yep. Sorry. I'm running over cables behind me. And it was even despite this setup, it was jumping kind of rear heavy, nose up, and then it landed in such a way that really hit hard on the bottom, and it ended up breaking the counter gear, right? And as you can see here, there's like 1, 2, 3 teeth that just snapped right off. And these counter gears, as usual for these things, they don't make them anymore. They're extremely rare, because this is for the Madcap, Astute, and Hilux/King Cab, and you can find them on eBay for extortionate prices. So what I did is I went to Shapeways, and there is a guy who has these counter gears available as a 3D printed part. So I'm going to try those out. I ordered a few to be printed up, and we'll see how they fit, and we'll see how durable they are. And to try to improve the durability, I have this Charisma slipper clutch. So this is a slipper for the GT10 RS. And this was a trick that I found online for how somebody modified their Tamiya Top Force, which also does not have a slipper clutch. And essentially, instead of putting a slipper clutch here on the spur gear, which you cannot do with this gearbox, you can put it on the pinion itself. So basically, this will mount onto the motor output shaft the way a pinion would, and then the rest of this, you basically get a custom pinion gear made by Charisma, so I'm getting that in the mail. And the pinion gear is like part of it acts kind of like the way a spur gear would act in a slipper setup. So you have slipper pads on either side, and then plates, and then you tighten it down with a screw and a spring. So basically, the pinion gear is embedded in a slipper clutch assembly, and hopefully that will take up any jolts or shocks to the drivetrain for this setup. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to try to test it out with, you know, the jump setup I have in the basement and see how that works. I'm not terribly optimistic, but I at least want to give it a try because I already invested so much time and money into this thing as it is. I figure it couldn't hurt to just put a little bit more money into it to see how that goes. If it doesn't go so well, then I'll just have to run my Tamiya VQS or my Tamiya Dirt Thrasher in the classic class for the Vintage Off-Road Nationals. The only other issue I've had with this is with the steering. It could just be the type of servo I have, but I have noticed that especially if I steer in one direction in particular, it doesn't go all the way back to center. It could be a few things. It could be, you know, maybe there's a little bit of bind here between the ball cups and the ball studs. It could be how tight I screw these down here. I tried to screw them down tight enough to eliminate play between the bell crank and the bearings and the screw, and this back off just a little bit to let this move somewhat freely. So it could be some of that. It could just be the torque of the servo itself that is having trouble pulling the steering back to center. So if you're going to do this kind of a setup, just just so you're aware, you're probably going to want a higher torque servo than what I'm using right here. This is a Trackstar DX99S, I think that's what it is. I use these in a lot of my cars because they're very, very fast, and they're not terribly expensive. They're under $30 or thereabouts. But for this car, I expect it to wander a little bit if I make a minor steering correction. If I turn left and back to center, it's going to drift left. If I turn right, back to center, it's going to drift right. So even if I can get the slipper clutch working, this alone could be reason enough for me to just not use this in a race at all. The thing is, this is a low profile servo, and I need a low profile servo to make the Ultra Shorty fit here. So if I'm going to get a higher torque servo, it has to be a low profile one, and those are going to be pretty expensive, and I want to try to avoid that much extra cost for a car like this. So anyway, we'll see. Just figured I'd give you an update. These gears suck. I'm sure plenty of you who have Astutes and Madcaps and King Cabs have had the same exact problem, so this is nothing new. But hopefully this Charisma slipper setup will fix that. The only thing is, you're very limited in the kinds of pinion gears you can run on this. Charisma didn't make a wide range of tooth counts or teeth counts for those pinion gears. They made a 24 tooth, a 20 tooth, and I think somewhere in the low teens, maybe for different models. And I was running a 25 tooth here, so largest I can get is a 24 tooth. I ordered one. It's shipping from the UK. And they don't make them anymore, which kind of sucks. And if you try to search online, they're actually pretty hard to find. There's only maybe one or two left in stock around the world. So at least for me, I have one coming in. It should work for me. But if you're trying to do the same thing, then you may need to find a different solution. Or maybe you can take a normal pinion gear and cut it up to sort of replicate what the Charisma pinion gear does. When I get that in and mount it, I'll maybe make a video about it just to show you guys what that looks like. Okay, so that's it for now for the Madcap. Thanks for watching.